going to talk about the bad party guest, and you can guess who that is. We're going to start with the Revelation letter, chapter 12, verses 1 through 5, in a way of introduction. I offered this to the kids, the junior high and high school kids on Wednesday night at Kids Club, and I asked them a question at the beginning: what is allegory? None of them knew. An allegory is a story or a poem or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning. Well, in the Revelation letter, chapter 12, John the Revelator, writing from the testimony of Jesus Christ, the resurrected, said, "A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne." Don't be surprised if you were to come to the Platt household and find among the manger scene a red dragon. Because if we were really appropriately going to show a manger scene, it would include John's description in the Revelation letter, chapter 12, of the dragon, Satan, the enemy, playing his role to do whatever he could to interrupt the coming of the king. An early attack. And indeed, we know that the enemy was in the garden. We know that the enemy has been active ever since his fall from glory. We know, based on this allegory in the Revelation letter, chapter 12, that Satan has always been ready to snatch any good that God would do. Now, as I introduce today's text, I want us to start thinking along the lines of the bad party guest. Satan is the bad party guest when it comes to the manger scene. We always picture Joseph and Mary and the sweet little baby and the shepherds showing up, and then later on, we don't know how much later, not that night I'm sure, but later on the Magi would come, having followed the star and giving their gifts that we talked about last week. Who will Satan use to disrupt God's plan? There's always that one person that you don't want to invite to your party because they will ruin everything. Today we're going to focus on that guest, because in this particular instance, the enemy, the dragon, Satan, uses an individual that we don't always give a proper mention to. He is the adversary. He didn't want Jesus to have a party. He wants to bring destruction, and as always, he has tools in his chest in his tool belt to bring destruction. In this case, Satan has chosen the tool called Herod the Great. Herod the Great was an individual who was king of Judea, who ruled under the authority and under the permission of the Roman Empire. I have here in my possession one other sermon that I will allude to, but more interestingly, I have 6 pages of information on Herod the Great. I have chosen to not read it all because of the time span. Pardon me. But here's a couple thoughts about Herod that you may not know. The Roman client king of Judea. It was referred to as the Herodian kingdom. He has been described as a madman who murdered his own family. And a great many rabbis, the evil genius of the Judean nation, prepared to commit any crime in order to gratify his unbounded ambition. The greatest builder in Jewish history, we know that he rebuilt the temple, he built Herodium, he married into Judaism, and so in many people's minds he was considered the king of the Jews, the king of Judea. Herod needed to show his worthiness as king of Judea to the new emperor, Augustus. Herod's support from the Roman Empire played a major role in allowing him to maintain his authority over Judea. He used a secret police with 2,000 soldiers to monitor and report the feelings of the general populace towards him. He wanted to marry a teenage bride, and so he did away with his wife and one son, sent them into exile, and then later on I think he murdered the teenage wife and a couple sons. Upon Herod's death, which would come when Jesus was not very old, Herod told his guards to go round up a group of distinguished individuals from Judea, and at the very moment that he was to die, they were to kill the distinguished individuals along with his death so that more people would mourn that day. This is Herod. In this text, Matthew 2, that we used last week in large part, and we'll use again this week, but focusing on a different character, we read in verse 13, when they had gone, speaking about the Magi, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, Joseph, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. And when he heard that Archelaus, which would be Herod's son, was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. Herod would have been a fantastic politician in our day. He certainly was a politician in his day with great authority. And if you've been on the news lately, you've seen a great disturbance in force in our world. There is much derangement. People are deranged at all kinds of things. Well, Herod had a derangement syndrome against a little baby, caused by a little baby whose name was Jesus. He was Emmanuel. He was God with us. Herod became disturbed. In Matthew chapter 2 and verses 3 through 8, which we've read previously, we read that concerning the Magi that came from the east to Jerusalem, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" There's the kicker, King of the Jews. "We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." And when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. So he's got advisors, you see. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written." And of course, lining out Bethlehem. Herod was, verse 7 says, "Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, 'Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him.'" This would make quite a movie. I don't think that it would probably have a rating on it that we would want to take our kids to see it. I'm pretty sure my wife wouldn't see it. She would not want to envision the actions of King Herod as he became deranged because of the birth of the real king. In his mind, that was a usurper. He says to the Magi, "Let me know when you find him, so I too may go and worship him." And we know that was the furthest thing from the truth. He was deceiving. He was sarcastic. The king of Judea, as he was called, was alarmed at the prospect of a usurper seizing the throne without the right to do so. Not realizing that Jesus' throne was elsewhere, and the confusion begins. Modern scholars agree that Herod suffered throughout his lifetime with depression and paranoia. I believe that he also was a bit of a narcissist. There is another sermon that I've used, possibly last year, written by an individual named Christian Chang. that makes a point concerning Herod's first mistake. Herod was too bent on doing his own will. He was determined to reject God's message, not because of a lack of knowledge, but a lack of the will to follow God. Not a lack of advice, for he had a group of chief priests and teachers of the law, plus the Magi from the east to advise him. It was a problem with his heart. It was not a lack of choice, because God had given him the opportunity and time to ponder and do the right. Christian James says, when you are bent on staying on the dark side, God will let you stay there. But if you seek him, you will find him. If you choose to harden your heart, no amount of light will be able to shine through. If we humble ourselves and heed God's voice, he is not hard to find. Herod was disturbed. Add to that the fact that his disturbing mindset led to him being furious. We read in verse 16, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted, he was furious. And then he began to act out, maybe like a spoiled child, maybe like a politician with derangement syndrome. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Jerusalem and its vicinity, 2 years old and under. Jeremiah says, a voice is heard, weeping in great mourning. From Herod's point of view, somebody's going to pay for the Magi's deception. How dare they not come back and tell me? How dare they outwit me? One time my brother was here a couple of weeks ago, you remember that? Growing up, I was my brother's main tormentor. He had a disposition that was pretty calm and at times quite shy. I used to torment him and pick on him, and which probably wasn't too smart given the fact that I was smaller and I couldn't run as fast, and I certainly couldn't whip him, and so I just ran my mouth. And I mocked him, and I called him names. And one time, he wouldn't fight back, and I got so mad at him, I ran at him. And I had my fist up, and I was going to punch him right in the face, show him how mad I was and how tough I was. And I remember, just a few feet before I got to him to let him have it, I tripped. And I fell. And he backed up, and he raised his knee when he backed up, and my eye caught his knee as he backed up. And for the next week or so, I had the prettiest black shiner you can ever imagine. And Tim never raised his fist. It was all me. Everybody thought that Tim really gave me a thumping, when I was the perp. I was the one that was looking for a fight. Tim was just trying to get out of the way. But I was furious. Somebody was going to pay. Christian Chang says Herod was so wrapped up in himself that nobody else mattered. That's the danger when you're too wrapped up in yourself, like a stupid teenage boy. You can't see the light. When you are too focused on yourself, you lose sense of reality and of the truth. Herod looked into the mirror and saw a king saw a king with power, prestige, and wealth. He saw a king who wore designer robes and a crown, and who had authority above all else. He answers to no one, and no one can be above him. Herod wanted to cling to all he had, power, prestige, wealth. When he heard that a king had been born, even though that new king was a helpless baby, he felt threatened. And indeed he did. When we become furious, we do things that rational people don't do. And so he ordered babies to be killed. Pardon me. How many babies was that? Bethlehem, small town outside of Jerusalem. Was it 20? Was it 30? Was it 40? We don't know. But we know he was furious. And we know that somebody was going to pay for the Magi's deception. This baby had to be taken out. And so thirdly, Herod became murderous. 13. Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. The angel knew. And he gave orders to kill the babies, the boys under 2. Just let that sink in for a moment. 2,000 soldiers at his disposal. Little application here. What could be said about someone who would kill innocent babies? Don't we live in a nation that kills innocent babies? In Nigeria, as of late, they've killed a lot of Christians. We're better than them, right? We just kill unwanted babies. You remember the red dragon waiting to devour the baby? Herod was disturbed. He was furious. He was murderous. He was a tool in the hands of the dragon. And he failed. We know that Herod would die and his kingdom would be divided up among 3 sons, and this caused Joseph and Mary to eventually move to Galilee, to a little town called Nazareth. I don't know how similar it was to Liscombe, but I'm guessing that it was probably more like Liscombe than it was Des Moines. Didn't really get a lot of recognition other than the fact that there was a Roman garrison there. People kind of avoided it. It might be a great place for somebody like Jesus to grow up, constantly under the watch of the Romans. Herod, the tool. While we like to think about a nice little Christmas story, the truth is Jesus was born into a culture that included people, that included royalty, that included a very angry, disturbed king that wanted to kill him. This would always be true about Jesus. There would always be someone that wanted to kill him. It's still true for his followers today. A poem I thought I'd bring in. Not very old, 2013. How could it be a silent night when angels shared the holy birth and shepherds ran to see the sight of God's own Son who came to earth? How could it be that it was calm a baby on a bed of straw, the Savior from the prophet's psalm, a Savior born, creation's all. If they knew what it was about, they would have made room in that inn. Yet men today still shut him out when he has paid the price for sin. How can we not know there's a plan? How can we not rejoice today? The Son of God became a man. He is the life, the truth, the way. Note a couple things. Satan wants to keep Jesus at bay. Secondly, God is not unaware of Satan's tactics. Thirdly, people will always and have always died because of Christ, including him, Jesus, God's Son. Isn't it ironic to think that there are party guests that showed up that made Jesus the unwelcome guest at his own party because they didn't want him there and it was his birthday? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 and following. Give me a moment. Paul said, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. There is a war. There are battles. There was a big battle fought when Herod got on the scene and began to carry out his disturbed, furious, and murderous plan. We were born into a dark world as well. The chief political figure in Jesus' day was not far from what we see today. We see the same kind of anger. We see the same kind of murderous activity and violence. The funny thing about saying these kinds of things is that depending on who the hearer is, depending on who's having that message go to their ears, when I talk about derangement or being furious or murderous or violent, it allows us the opportunity to say, well, I hope so-and-so is listening. Or wouldn't our country be better if so-and-so would hear that message about hate? Because the funny thing about truth is we tend to be pretty selective as to how and where and who we apply it to. When the truth of the matter is we really need to be looking within ourselves. How has Satan, the enemy, the dragon, how has the derangement, how has the murderous, violent ideas or thoughts affected us? I got to tell you, sometimes it's hard to look at the talking heads. After a while, you just turn them off because it's the same old story, right? But I know that one of the tactics of the evil one is that if he will get his tools to act in a certain way long enough, or to spiel whatever his tools are going to say, if they can use that spiel long enough, people will begin to hear it. Now somebody might say, he's done gone political. No, I haven't. Because I'm talking to the church. Can I be brought to hate? Yeah, I can. Can I be brought to murder? I can. Can I be brought to violence? I can. Because the same enemy, the same dragon, wants to hurt God. And how does that dragon, how does that enemy hurt God? By hurting his people. If the enemy wanted to use tools to influence and harm today, whom would he choose? The government? The schools? The pulpits? The media? Social media? Holidays? Who was showing up at the party? I was with a trooper 2 or 3 years ago, a friend of mine who's now retired, and he was the promotional, they called him a PRO, Public Relations Officer for the post. And so he would go and do presentations. He also did school bus checks. But he would go to schools and he would talk about things pertinent to young people. He talked about, he had a program on trafficking that was very interesting. But I went with him 2 different times to 2 different schools where he gave a presentation to groups on the subject of cyber bullying. It's hard to imagine that it's come to that, isn't it? It's no longer about the schoolyard where kids may taunt somebody else. Now they just get on their phone and they text, or their computer, or send a post, or send a text, or send a message about somebody else. Satan is still the unwelcome guest at many a party, and he's using individuals as his tool. The bottom line is Jesus came to save, to seek and to save the lost. And somebody is still mad about it.